my team of dedicated admins. So I think there's Rebecca. All right, so looks like we're Vicky's here. Okay, so yeah, so we're. Oh, I didn't mean to go backwards one. I'm giving you a sneak
Like we're
preview.
missing Lori.
Yes, it's the only board member I don't see.
Deb, do you know if Lori's coming? You could shake your head and yes or no. You don't know?
I saw Nicole. Oh, my whistling went off, so that's good. Let's hope the furnace doesn't kick back on.
Sorry to bring that up.
No, you're not, Dave. You got to rattle me right before the presentation and picking on me.
No,
right,
I
so-
heard it too, and I didn't know if I was hearing things or what was happening.
Well, you never know in my house what you'll hear. So
we're live on YouTube and we're live on here. If any attendees come in, just let you know.
okay.
So because we're live, I think we should have Steve sing that that snow song, that snippet song.
Yeah,
I
we'll give you a nice commercial.
will have you know that I talked to Todd Helming and Carl today, and I'm working on a plan, but it may not come to may not come together as a perfect storm for this year, but there's going to be a beauty next year. We'll see if we have time and how many storms we have. Want to call us to order, Becky, or
Yep,
are we good?
we'll call the meeting of the Plainville Board of Education budget session to order on, what are we, February 4th, yes?
Yes.
Yep.
Can everybody see my presentation okay?
Yes.
All right.
We'll
So
let Superintendent take it away.
thank you. So I'm sorry for the extra budget discussion meeting. I know we didn't have this on our budget calendar. However, we had, following our last meeting on Thursday, some exciting news came out on Friday regarding the ESSER 2 funds and more details on that, and explaining how much, money Plainville could expect through that process. So I wanted to give a follow-up and some additional considerations for the Board of Education based on how that money can be utilized to support our recovery to a more of a normalized stage in Plainville. So I'll jump right in if I can. As we know, we always start with our rings document and our guiding principles and values and goals and actions and our vision, I should say. And this is at the forefront of all of our decisions that all tie back to our budget dollars, should all connect directly to this shared vision document, which we will be looking at and reviewing in a comprehensive strategic planning process at the end of next summer, beginning of next fall, for the next 5 years. And of course, I'm embedding the portrait of the graduate. We'll be honoring 2 more portrait pioneers, very exciting ones on Monday night. Again, these qualities are the traits and attributes we want all of our students to develop and graduate with a balanced, repertoire, if you will, or a set of skills in these areas, or, when they leave Plainville schools, prepared for the world ahead. This is giving you just an overview of recommended Board of Education budget. My proposed budget originally is 2.84%. And that included 5 new positions that would help us to adjust to a lot of the COVID strains and stress and things that we need to do to ensure equity, social and emotional learning, and mastery of skills aligned with our vision. We also had embedded some summer programming fee funding, additional funding that more than typical, some funding for programs after school next year to accelerate, innovate, and move our students forward in their learning who may have developed learning gaps due to COVID. It also included additional software that we have had to use due to COVID and due to remote learning needs, also using it in the classroom as well, but specifically aligned with COVID needs and also with our new math curriculum, but definitely a need due to remote learning. So that was all included in the 2.84%. That was also incorporating $100,000 of proposed ESSER funding, including ESSER 1, which can be used up until September of 2022. We have about 150,000, about half that money's left. We had 337,000 originally in that grant. we used all, well, you'll see on another slide, the CRF funds are all utilized, 875,000 for many of the expenses of COVID from the past, in this past year. And then ESSER 2, we built, so a total of 100,000 that first budget. We didn't know what ESSER 2 would bring. We heard it was going to be probably more than the first ESSER funding. So the board was presented with a budget at our first budget workshop of 2.84%, which would have been a $1.112 million increase over last year. And I showed you all the slides where, the contractual increases alone and insurance and pensions and things that are fixed costs, as far as we know them right now, based on contractual bargaining, collective bargaining, was 2.52%. So 0.32% over the contractual increases. And it included a lot of the things I said for COVID. Just giving you kind of what I'm proposing that you consider, based on the new information regarding ESSER 2, would be that you could further reduce this by pulling out the coronavirus COVID-19 related expenses that we had built into this budget to help us to recover. So that included the extra positions. Kevin's team is pretty well taxed. After talking with Kevin though, and it had been put in as a full position, but Kevin's okay with a part-time person to really help with the Chromebook, installations, updates, getting those out, repairs, things like that. Lesser skill, high skill positions than what Kevin and Mark and Dan and Nick and Doug and his team do. But still essential for the ongoing technology needs of the district. So at the last meeting, I proposed reducing that to a half-time position, keeping the other 4 positions in there. We still recommend that same change of $25,000 taken out of that. The additional ESSER offsets, so all the staffing positions total before the reduction in technology were 230, 250, 242. After we take out the 25 for the technology, it brought that total down for all the new positions to 205,242. We already had 100,000 built in, as I had mentioned, for the ESSER. So, adding that back in just to show the accounting of it all. $20,000 of summer and after school programs, and then 77,482 of the additional software and some additional instructional supplies that are really more related to adjusting to COVID needs. So the total that we could say would be justified in the COVID related expenses amount to 227,724, which would bring our budget increase up, instead of 2.84 or 2.52, which was the last consideration that I offered to the board based on unknown ESSER funds at the time. It would bring us to 2.26 for a Board of Education budget that you could bring to consider passing and bring to the town council for their further, consideration. That would be a total ESSER offset of $302,724 of reductions to our budget, our normal operating budget. I'm trying to, Kevin, all the pictures are along the bottom. I just want to try to move these so that I don't see. All right, that's good. Sorry, I'm going the wrong direction here.
Use the arrow keys, Steve.
That's what I'm using. It's just
Okay.
it's a little bit of a delay. And it's taking me the wrong direction. So
Go left.
I did. It was taking me right. All right, let me
So mouse over, and then the arrows will be on the screen. It should be.
Motion to adjourn?
Escape. Hit escape.
I did that. All right, we're good now.
There you go. Go back to where you.
Don't mind me. I just wanted to add a little dramatic effect. So I was trying to get rid of the pictures at the bottom because I couldn't see my notes at the bottom of the slide, so I apologize. They were covering all the notes for this slide. So as I said, this would reduce the budget of all staffing increases that are COVID related. I will tell you that some of those increases We will reassess, following the next couple of years with the COVID impact. We'll reassess and determine which of those positions may need to stay in our operating budget. There's a likelihood that we may need to do some shifting in our staffing to account for that addition, because in total, all the expenses that would be tabled for ongoing consideration in the 2023-2024 budget, we're looking that far ahead, because that's when this ESSER 2 has to be used by September 30th of 2023, would be about $300,000, $302,000. So Kevin, hold on a second. All right, that's good. The little bar that said who was talking was directly over the words that I was trying to access. This is not my day. So it's important that we understand that while we can and while we should assign costs to the grant, because that's what the grant is for COVID-related expenses, we have to be mindful of anything recurring. So that's where the 302, that's where we must consider those positions and some of the software that we may and probably will continue to use after COVID is a thing of the past and we're looking to the future. So it's just something to be mindful of. So this is what it looks like in this simple budget slide that we always share. The adopted budget for this year was $39,144,267. The budget the recommended budget for your consideration, my proposed budget is still, that original 2.84. With these considerations, it would be $40,028,970, so a dollar increase of $884,703. And that would be a 2.26% increase over last year. Just a reminder and some different ways of looking at the primary drivers, offsets, and adjusted budget. This is something that Town Council Chairwoman Puglisi had mentioned at the last meeting, as receiving a notification from the state on different grants, and I know there was a question about that, and I just wanted to address that because I did look at this in detail, and there are many grants listed here. Some of them are specific to education, such as ESSER and some of the CRF funds. However, this is a pretty comprehensive list of all the grant funds that are available to municipalities and states that cover a lot more than just schools. So it's a comprehensive look at all the grants. Not some of them we are not able to access as a school system. So, specifically ESSER 2 is not, it's important to note that ESSER 2 is not intended for districts in the midst of budgeting to think about how they can reduce typical budget expenses. There are programs and grants, there are grants available for that. That's what this fiscal analysis speaks to. So our district, our PCS district and school leadership, our team is working to set end goals for 2 years now, backward planning, and with a number of projects. We've been very active since learning of a more concrete dollar figure, because within my original proposed budget, there were a lot of different ideas that we would have really liked to do, but we knew that would have driven our budget up, significantly for a number of projects that are kind of 1 or 2 year projects to recover and accelerate our students. And, in an effort to balance what the needs of our school community and the taxpayer, we added those positions, we added technology and software, and we added, summer and after school programs. But there was a lot more that was discussed as, wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be valuable to our kids? Wouldn't it be important for our district? So that's what we've really been digging into. And I'll tell you that we're at the start of that work, but I'm already excited about many of the ideas that we've been discussing for quite a while. But, now that they're more able to be funded, less theoretical and more, they're going to become projects, 2-year projects with a forecasted, expense, who's going to be involved, who's the point person, what's the end goal for those projects, and, for our students and our staff and our district. So I'm excited about that work, and we've already started. We've had a few meetings on it already this week. So this is a document I sent to all the Board of Ed members. This was just, what explains ESSER 2 and what the priority areas are that were released. So I won't go into that. Sam put this together for me. I thought it's a nice way of looking at Plainville's allocation of ESSER 2. it just shows you where we stand in two different ways. So the top graph shows you where from most to least we rank 42nd with $1.605 million in grant entitlement. The top 10 districts are receiving 54.91% of all the grant money. So that just shows you those top 10 districts, the Hartford, the Stanford, and many of the, Bridgeports and many of the large cities are receiving more than half of the money in total. But Plainville is, we are 42nd in overall in dollars. And this was done strictly by the title appropriations formula that they use for title grants, Title I, Title II. So those are based on a number of metrics that determine, wealth, poverty, need of a town. So when you look at it on a per pupil amount, is $697 per pupil when you look at the 1.605 million for our 2,270 or so students, and we rank 30th out of 166 towns. So I would say that, as far as the dollars we're getting, we did well, but there's a reason we did well. It's because there's a need, and those dollars are meant to help us address those needs. There's a lot on this slide, but I just want to focus on a few things. You saw the top part of this grant offset picture last meeting, but the ESSER funds part 2 was left as TBD, to be determined. This gives you the beginning point and the end point of when the funds need to be used. As I said at the last meeting, we've already spent all the CRF funds that had to be spent down and appropriated by December 30th of this past 2020. We're about half, or a little more than half, I think, done with the 337,000 of the ESSER Part 1 funds, and we have needs for the second half of that we've been working on. So when you look at the 4 key areas that the ESSER 2 can be used for, and it specifies in great detail, and it's on the next slide. I won't go into it, but you have access to it. It's on the state website and everywhere else. Academic supports, learning loss, learning acceleration and recovery, family and community connections, school safety and social emotional well-being of the whole student and of the school staff, and remote learning, staff development, and the digital divide. So that's the technology I had mentioned at the last meeting that I had heard, is really that community connections and family outreach. It's the SEL and the mental health piece, that third bullet. It's the academic learning loss, the first bullet, and then technology being the fourth bullet, and the professional development as well. The guidelines disallow these funds to be used to supplant typical operating budget expenses, and that was specifically stated at the meeting that Sam Atherstein and I attended on Tuesday at 1:30 with Kathy Dempsey and others from the state. That was a question, can it be used to just, take down your budget, things that you would always get in a typical year. And, the answer was clearly no. So it's just important to note that. And then prior to learning of these funds being available, our team had already, as I said, started outlining a number of projects and programs that we were hoping to implement. Of course, funding was always the issue. So this is going to help a lot. This breaks down the 4 priority areas more specifically, and it's in that linked document that's in this presentation, which I'll share with all of you after I'm done tonight, and we'll put it on the website too. The pie graphs at the bottom are just something that, they represent an estimation, about half of the money being spent in 2021, 2022, half the money being spent the following year. That's not going to be exact. It's going to, it'll vary somewhat, but we'll definitely spend the money. We don't plan on giving it back, and there are plenty of needs that can be assigned those dollars. And then on the right, it just breaks into the 4 areas, kind of a visual look, and that will also likely change depending on how we decide. Right now, we're in the process. We have about 20 projects that we're looking at. We're in the process. I have a meeting with all the principals on Wednesday. We're going to prioritize all those projects and put them into an action plan and a really a project plan, I should say. And once we have those prioritized, so we won't be able to do everything. Most likely, there's only we have limited capacity and time and dollars and staffing, and there are factors that, but we're going to get a lot done, and I'm excited for the outcomes we're expecting. So this is just in a real quick snapshot, and more has been added since I copied these just categories onto a slide. We have a project planning template that Sam created, which is really excellent, that we're going to use to really guide each of these. But Tawana has been very busy in there, I saw, and I know working with our whole team who's here today. I did invite our core central office team. If there's any questions that anyone has when we're talking about some of these areas and how that it all plays in, I asked them to be here. I haven't really required the administrators to join except for the first night. I just felt like it was, they know enough about what I'm talking about. They hear enough from me, so I've let them off from these meetings. But I did ask, Vicky and Lily and Tawana and Dave and Sam and Kevin. Hope I didn't forget anybody to be here with me if there's any questions. So these are just some of the areas. Expanding the summer remediation acceleration programs, that was planned from the beginning. I built it into our original budget. We've taken it out since, and it's going to be grant funded, and we're going to grow that even more at each level, elementary, middle, and high school. So I'll share a lot more details on the projects when we have these better articulated. There's been some work done on these, but we still have more to do. Increasing the access and rigor of rigorous coursework. So this is the dual enrollment programs, offering more classes, more training for teachers to be able to teach those classes, the advanced placement course at the high school, ECE, the articulated agreements with, Gateway Community College, Tunxus, really building that relevance. We already have articulations with CCSU, and kids are getting credits there, while they're in high school. So a lot of great things, but we want to expand on those, and it costs money to do that and for the training. And investment in sensory self-regulation equipment. This is for our most needy students. This is something that Dave had experience with in other districts, and and Vicky as well. But we're really working on a very comprehensive a room and program with equipment that's really going to help our most needy students to continue to improve in their program. The consideration of pre-K funding project that would then that's a complex one, but it has some appeal where it would allow us, if we're not charging tuition for pre-K, we'd be able to phase them into our ECS calculations. But there's a loss in doing so for a couple of years that we've not been able to justify. But this would accelerate learning for our youngest and most vulnerable, and also bring up pre-K enrollment. Vicky's also working on an arrangement with the YMCA to offer. We're looking to offer before and after care at our schools for our students. That is a big appeal for parents. It's one of the reasons we've lost a lot of our pre-K, but it would also be available potentially for other grades as well. So that's in the works. Vicky's been meeting with YMCA staff, so some exciting things there. And there's others, but under the topic of community, Lily's really taken this on with a central registration. We moved an office professional from Linden to the curriculum and EL equity and student support specialist office area at the high school, having a centralized registration, creating a welcome center that's friendly and open and supportive to everyone who comes to our district from everywhere, and really getting them off on the right foot. And a lot of work's going to be done on that over the summer. Supportive community outreach programs that are linked to that and others, family community connections, training, professional development for parents, helping them to learn how to use the technology, how to support their children, not teaching them how to be a parent, but teaching them some skills that will help them to be a better advocate and support for their child with their schoolwork, because it's more and more complicated, in this generation. And then bringing in guest speakers, things like that. Expansion of business partnerships, Lynn Davis and Sue and Deb Peichel working with that too. But the internships are around town for our high school students who are looking for that authentic experience, working with our many corporations, businesses around town, building on that, and they get high school credit as well at the same time. Well-being and social emotional learning. We've done so much. We're ahead of the game in many ways, but we have a long way to go. I'm so proud of the charter champion work, all the ruler work, so many, second step, but so many programs that we have, and you learned about in my first presentation. But we have a lot more to do, and there's a lot more support. We have more and more students who are at serious risk, who are in need. I'm working with the police. I had police go out and do a wellness check today. So we're really, there is a need for that. And it's become very powerful how evident the need is, but how effective it is when you're doing it well. And our schools are starting to do some great things. we started with staff. Now we're working, with the kids. So addition of the school psychologist is critical. I will say that Vicky had asked me for this position, and, and principals had advocated too, that would be really helpful for the extensive needs that we had in the past. Through the process of kind of weaning down the budgets to get to a reasonable place, it had been removed. This is a great opportunity and the perfect time to add the psychologist that we anticipate will probably need to stay. So this is one of those things to be considered. Continued SEL program supports collaboration and problem solving with the assessment and training team. This is something that, one of my colleagues could tell you more about. This one seems kind of out of the blue, but on the level of safety, we looked at water bottle filling stations, but they're very expensive. We decided not to do it and use the money from the CRF for other things that we had, other needs. But this would be certain, Carl specifically at the high school was looking to do that, where kids, you're not bending down in a busy hallway and you just fill your water bottle and stay hydrated, and it's clean and safe. Technology, consider training sessions for families, as I mentioned, multiple languages, providing that access. Consider acquiring a learning management system. This is very preliminary. I threw it out there because I know Southington and some other districts have used a system like Canvas, like the colleges use, Blackboard, things like that. We're still looking at it. It's just something I threw on as a consideration. But right now we're using Google Classroom and Seesaw and other tools. So we'd look at that. Look at the replacement cycle and considering, right? Kevin and his team have done an incredible job of expanding technology to the needs of our district for this, the school closure and then the hybrid and then our C cohort students who are full remote. But looking to do that on a more permanent basis, so those students down all the way from K to 12 have access to the technology they need that will really support the best learning outcomes. And then finally, and not finally, but finally on for tonight, replace the old MacBooks. This was part of the capital plan. It's in the capital plan now, and it's I believe we have it built in where those old MacBooks are being replaced, but we need more Chromebooks, so that could be they're supporting kids. That could be considered a need that we could supplement. So that's just an overview, big picture. My original proposed budget 2.84. I gave you some other things to think about. I am pleased with the amount of resources that are available to us. We're going to use them in a very thoughtful and meaningful way to support kids and to support continued learning and to really accelerate and fill those learning gaps. We have I have the best team that there is to work on these projects. And I'm really excited about the end goals that we're looking at. So more to come on all of that. But for now, I guess what I'm sharing with the board is that I believe that, the budget with a 2.26% increase, still getting everything that was in the 2.84% increase budget, just paying for it for the next couple of years out of the grant, would get us what we need and would really help us to move forward. And outside of that, we'll also have other programs and things that I mentioned that would not be in our budget, but would be projects to help us recover from COVID using the ESSER 2 funds. So I said a mouthful. I'll stop rambling on. And if anyone has questions of me or perhaps of anyone on my team I invited, whether it's about the budget or about a project you're curious about, whatever I can help with.
Go ahead, Beck.
I'm sorry, I can't see everybody. So if your hand's up, I just start talking.
No worries. I wanted to ask about the academic programs for summer school and after school. How inclusive are those going to be? Because I can imagine that many kids are going to need help.
Okay. We already had a meeting on this with Tawana and Lily and Dave, and I know Vicky's involved and Christina. So any of you want to jump in and talk about some of the initial breakdown and outline of that?
Yeah, so, budget wise, there's going to be limitations to how many we're going to be able to enroll in any of the programs we create. So we're really going to look hard at the data at every level, because we'd like to have programs for every level. So we're looking at reading and math for the elementary level, And we're looking really deeply at the data for standards to see exactly where are there students where just our supports that we can use in the regular classroom just aren't going to work. We're not going to get them back to where we need them. So we're looking at those students where we know that they need something extra, in addition to the tiered remediation that we can give during the regular school time. And we're also looking at students who, with summer loss, because there's always a little summer loss for every student, that's going to put them even farther behind. So we're really going to do a data dive, and we've started this work already with collecting data from all levels to really see how many students are we talking about, what skills are we talking about, and how many teachers can we get that are skilled at the areas that we really need to teach.
So before the students would have summer school help or whatever, there would be other approaches and all of those things tried beforehand. And then, yeah, so they're going to really have a need. And what percentage of like students do you think with this funding, are you planning on? Like, what do you think you'll be able to get done with the funds that you have?
So we're hoping that we have enough funds to do an expanded program that would be beyond what we would normally do. So we're looking for definitely getting more kids in, but we also have to be mindful of keeping, when we bring the kids in, it's gonna be targeted instruction. So we wanna make sure the classes and the groups aren't too large. So that's gonna be a consideration too. So that would mean more staff. So we really have to look at how many kids I couldn't tell you like a percentage or number right now until we really get to look at the data and see, by looking at end of year standards and goals, where are kids now mid-year, what learning, for the next 4 or 5 months are we going to get done? Where will our kids be at that time? And we're going to make educated guesses as to how many kids we can actually put in a program based on the data, see where we are, revisit that towards the end of the year, and then really establish those groups.
And what was the dollar amount difference between the budget, the previous budget to now? Was it 300,000, something like that?
227,000.
Well, no, we had a dollar increase of 1,112,428, and now we're at 800,000 something, right?
You mean for the 8.84 or the 2.84 or the 2.52 to where we are now?
Okay, so where we are at, sorry, what was the final number now?
2.26.
And the final dollar amount.
887,000 and change.
So roughly about 300,000 from the first.
84,703 actually.
Yeah. And like I said, anything that was removed is going to be funded just through the ESSER 2 funds. There's nothing that's just being cut out of there except for the half technology position we decided we didn't need. But everything else is going to be funded, and in our programming, it's just going to be paid for the next couple of years out of a different resource, the federal funds. We're still in the very infancy stage of planning how to use all those dollars. And it's a lot of money, but it'll go. It'll go quickly. With all the different salaries for the summer employees. Where Carl's estimating, doubling the high school credit recovery program from its normal student enrollment and teaching staff, perhaps. So, we have the meeting on Wednesday to really dive into priorities. What's the most important? If you try to do everything, you're probably not going to do anything very well. So we're going to really prioritize what's going to give us the most bang for the buck with in those 4 different areas.
I have a quick question for Dave. Do we have any idea of the students in cohort C? How many of those are going to be falling behind and are going to be needing extra support you were just talking about?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea at this point how many of them would be involved, where they are?
From initial discussions and talking with teachers, it seems like, especially at the older levels, that the remote students might need more. The data is when we really dive into this data, it's going to tell us more. But from initial discussions, it looks like our remote students are probably going to need more support.
Yeah, I thought that. Yeah. Thank you, Dave.
Yep.
And that varies depending on the home, Foster, but some kids have more, more support at home and more guidance and supervision and direction, and others have a lot less. So yeah, there's a big variability depending on who you have supporting you at home. So some kids in remote C are doing fantastic, and others are struggling more because they don't have as much. Parents, maybe both parents are working. You have an older sibling who's checking in on them and trying to help them when they can. So there's so many different situations, but absolutely an important need.
And also for in-class children too, right? I mean, everybody missed March till June, and
Yeah.
things have been cut for kids that are attending every day as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're, like I've said all along, we're in better shape than many districts. I think we've done a really good job in providing a lot more instruction, a lot more time, a lot more just education when you compare it to some districts have an entire day off each week, where the kids just check in for a 10-minute meeting and they take attendance and call it a day. It's, I don't understand it, but I think we've kind of held the bar of our level of expectations in Plainville, and our teachers are doing, and our administrators have just done an incredible job of, we're not perfect and there's no perfect solution to this whole scenario. It's been a really hard situation to adjust to, but I'm proud of the work we've done, but we definitely have gaps. Our gaps are a lot smaller than a lot of communities, though, I will say that.
Is there any indication, Steve, of how well we are doing with the ESSER 2 has to directly relate back to the fact that we have been doing in school more than a lot of other districts?
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be a connection for this one, Foster. The coronavirus relief fund, the CRF, that $875,000 that we had, that was specifically intended to cover expenses related to keeping kids in school. These are a lot more broadly usable, I guess, if that makes sense. So this can be used for things that were purchased to provide remote instruction, to provide for our cohort C students. It's a lot more. There's more variability to what we can use them for. CRF was more specific to being in school, but the amount of money we got was directly from the Title I appropriations formula. So
Okay.
it didn't have to do with that particular piece. We got more money from CRF because we were full in school, and there were many districts that never opened up at all. So they lost money that they had said they needed in order to reopen, but they never reopened. So that money went back to the pool and they gave it to the districts that were open like us. So
one way you might think of it is our starting point is further along than a lot of other districts, so our money can go further.
Yep.
Thanks, Sam. Sam, did I leave anything out in that presentation because we worked on it together, so feel free to.
The only clarification I want to add is ESSER 1 is not, we forecast it based on the rate we're spending it to be 50% spent by the end of June.
By the end of the year, I'm sorry. Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
But you did great. I think you covered all the bases.
Thanks, Sam. Other questions for me or my team, who's happy to help and working really hard? It's they don't have to say anything. I'm sure they're fine with not doing so, but if you have any specific questions, I think, and I mentioned to you, and I emailed all of you that I was meeting with Robert and Rob with Sam yesterday. We had the meeting with the state at 1:30, and then we met at 4 just to talk about the town's kind of big picture and, kind of what we're looking at, and just reiterating some of the points that I was, as far as where I was, where I was not willing to take things out of the operating budget because it didn't, relate to the coronavirus. But it was a good conversation. I think it's at least I believe that they think 2.26 is a solid and understandable number that makes sense. Everything in our budget is it's justifiable. It's a really strong. It's an aggressive budget, but we do have those funds through the grant that will really provide a lever to catapult us back, to where we want to be. We're going to set some pretty aggressive goals for student gains and remediation and supports, and that takes programming, it takes staff, it takes resources. And I believe that the ESSER 2 grant, and Kathy Dempsey in our call on yesterday said that, or Tuesday, said that she anticipates there will be more money coming as well, but we don't know when, how much, but so for the districts that didn't maybe didn't do as well or need funds, there may be more money coming as well. So in an effort to balance what we need as a district, and being conscious of the things we talked about at the last meeting, I try to balance the two. Students are first, our schools are first. In my mind, as a superintendent, it's my job to give you a budget I believe is going to take care of all those needs. I believe this does, and I support it. It's up to you to support it. If you have questions or feel that it's not, I'm happy to answer any of that. But I'm confident in this budget and in the additional ESSER 2 funds, ESSER 1 funds, that we're going to be able to do some really great things. And then we're going to reevaluate and reassess where we are as we are, throughout the process. But then as we're starting to get ready for the 23-24 budget year, what resources do we have in place that aren't getting us the benefits we want? What resources that we added do we want to keep? Which ones do we no longer need? Do we still need the tutors at the high school? Do we still need, a psychologist? I would probably imagine we will, but the, family school liaison, and we're also looking at being more thoughtful. I shouldn't say more thoughtful, but being, more planful. That's not even the right way to say it, but with the use of our title grant money and use of, for positions we may want to build into that grant, the title grant, earlier in the process. We use those funds, we use them well, but we're just going to be more planful in how we use those funds to support some of the positions that we need. So we may be able to, take some of those positions that are being covered by the ESSER 2 funds and transition some of that staff over to be covered in part by the title funds, like, our EL equity in Lily, she's covered in part by, the Title I grant. So, because she's supporting a very, very specific student needs that we've determined are really important. And so I think I've
The question.
said a lot. Any questions?
I just have a couple comments. One of my concerns is that when the grant money runs out, we're stuck with paying for it from our money. And can you guys guarantee that we will have enough money left over from the grants that we're getting this year to be able to pay for everything again next year?
Yes, we're gonna budget the grant money that way. So we're not planning on spending like 90% of the grant this year and then having all those resources in place and then try to build it into the operating budget next year, if that's what you mean.
Well,
Sam,
Go ahead.
maybe I
well, one
got,
way to think of it is the salaries that we're putting into this grant this year and next year will absorb about 600,000 or 37% of the grant. So I think the staff knows that 37% of that grant is off the table, that's going to be absorbed by those 5 positions and the software. And then we're working with the rest of it. So I think we're planning accordingly.
My concern is just that something happens between now and next year and we have to use that money, because then we're increasing our budget a year before we thought we were.
Well, I think one thing COVID's taught us is we have no idea what's going to happen.
Well, right. And that's why I like to be a little bit more conservative with budgets and stuff, because we don't know what's going to happen. So it's great that we got the grant money and we can fund it for this year, but what happens in the future? And because the way Connecticut is, whatever our budget is this year, we can't decrease it next year. So we're stuck where we are. And it would look very different if we didn't have any grant money this year. So that's what concerns me.
well, if we didn't have grant money, I'd still be proposing the 2.84 for the board's consideration. All those positions I believe are really important. You know, if we didn't have coronavirus, maybe it would be different. We may not need, we wouldn't need those positions, or a lot of them anyway. But no, so and I know what you're saying, Nicole, but I think, I don't know if Sam, I think Sam explained it, but we're not going to overextend our use of that budget so that we put ourselves in a position where we have these programs and staffing in place and we can't afford to pay it out of the grant the second year. So it's going to be spread out so that for the next 2 years, everything will be covered related to coronavirus, you know, recovery from the grant. You know, like I said, there's about $302,000 of positions, software, and programs that at the end of those 2 years, we're going to have to look at and say, well, which of these things are vital to continue, and do we build those into our operating budget? What reductions do we make to our budget to make room for those? Are we increasing our budget at that time? You know, so that will be something that we have to keep on the radar. That's why we're looking at, I don't normally look at, except for capital improvement plan, I don't normally look at the budget 3 years ahead. We look at all of our contractual increases. We try to be as aggressive as we can with the supply accounts and not add unnecessary things. We're, you know, I think we've done a really good job with that in the past few years. But we're looking 3 years ahead now because we know the impact of adding resources, especially personnel, over time, you know, if it's funded by a grant, and then what happens when the grant's gone. So we have thought of all that. You know, I have some ideas about, you know, potential shifts, you know, once we get to that point, but you know, there's a lot of, like you said, it's so unpredictable. There's a lot of things to still work through over the next couple of years, and who knows what's going to happen next. But, Sam, you said 600 something thousand. I thought it was closer to.
That's for 1 year, so 2 years of that. The 300,000 that came out of the offsets this year get repeated next year. So that's 300,000 in that software. I mean, a little bit of that's instructional supplies and summer school, but for the most part, it's those 5 positions in software. And so we're counting on that being twice. And then I think I understand what you're saying, Nicole, is to be conservative. We face an unpredictable situation still next year. And I think you're saying be conservative in our normal operating budget because of that, to leave room for those uncertainties. And what I think Mr. LePage is saying is our plan A is to be flexible with that $1.6 million. You know, we will come up with a plan, but we will understand that that plan is in reaction to a lot of unforeseen circumstances. And so I think Mr. LePage expects that to change, you know, multiple times as we move ahead, but with confidence that we won't have to affect our operating budget with excesses, you know, that we'll manage it within the COVID grants and the potential for additional COVID grants, as we were told on the call this week.
And the tricky thing is going to be not leaving money behind. You know, we want to spend the money in a meaningful way. So, you know, we're going to be constantly assessing what we have in place, you know, analyzing the cost of what we have in place. You know, if we find that we have additional needs and we have additional resources that are, you know, in danger of being returned, you know, I think we're going to continue to add programs and services and supports to address the needs that we have. So, you know, I don't know if that made any sense, but, you know, we're I guess my point is that we're going to closely monitor the money that we have, how our programs are doing, using data from students, families, staff, and then really doing data specific projects to address gaps in learning loss and needs, mental health needs, and then other you know, community resources that we can add. So.
Any other questions that anybody has at the moment? Sam? You're muted, Sam.
I'm sorry, Kathy had her hand up.
Okay.
Thank you. I forgot to unmute myself. My apologies. I did have a question. You had in your budget for next year a transition position, which is a part-time position. Is that one of your positions that you're going to be funding through this grant?
No, that's for students with special needs who are transitioning from school to work. So they go out. We've had that position in place for a long time. Or for a few years. It's a transition coordinator. That's the high school students who go out and work in the community and they learn job skills and that program. So I think we're going on to Vicky could answer that.
Okay, I thought it was a new position that you were adding, but maybe I misunderstood.
Vicky, are you there?
Yeah, what we did is we sort of, it didn't change funding. I think we changed the name of it a little bit. It is one of our former school psychologists who retired. We're mandated by law to have special ed programs for students up to age 20 to their 22nd birthday. And so she's helping us to create that program. So it was kind of moving some funding around and renaming that to have that part-time person to help us build that program. And meet the mandates for the special education.
Okay.
Thanks, Vicky.
Thank you. Just one more thought. Regarding funding, we all know that there's the federal government is now looking at a $1.2 trillion package that has yet to be voted on, but it's imminent. And I'm sure that there is a very large piece of that will be dedicated to education. So my guess is there will be more money coming. Nobody knows how much or when it'll happen, but I believe it's going to be very soon. So
Yeah, that'll be good. I mean, I just don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's kind of what they alluded to in the state meeting. Just the parameters they put on spending that are what restrict us a little bit. So, they guide how that can be spent and how it can't, but it's good news. It'll be helpful to our goals for the district and remaining, not adding those costs into our operating budget. Anything extra would be grant funded. So it's exciting. Thank you, Kathy.
Sam.
Just responding to, I'm still thinking about Nicole's comments and then what Kathy added. If there's one weakness in our budget, it might be special ed outplacements. That's not different than any other year. It's always a wild card. It's almost impossible to predict. The difference this year is that we are facing unfavorable variances, significant unfavorable variances this year that we kind of threw the dice and decided not to build into next year's budget just because of everything going on, economic conditions and potential for future grants. But everybody should be aware that that's when Nicole said, "Are you confident?" That would be the one area. I wouldn't say we're not confident, but it's just such an unknown.
Right.
And am I correct in assuming that we can't use any of the grant money to go towards special ed because that's not directly related to COVID?
Yeah, the special ed costs are part of our normal operating budget. So I would say yes and no. So we can use the money to, if there was a learning loss for students who have special needs and we need to add some acceleration programs or additional summer programming, which is what part of the money we're using, or other things that we need for special education students. But as far as replacing what we normally have in our budget for special ed costs, we're not supposed to do that.
And I was just going to say, our plans with the money do include like supports for all students that will help with hopefully giving kids what they need to stay in instead of outplacement, like our sensory equipment and sensory rooms. And just, we are thinking ahead at the trauma and the impact for all our students. And some of this equipment is meant to keep our kids and give them what they need inside our district.
So when we last met on the budget, the superintendent's recommendation was a 2.86 percent. 84, making it worse, right, Steve?
Yeah.
2.84% increase. And I did ask everybody how they felt about it. So now, given the new information that we obtained since then about the ESSER 2 grant and the changes in recommendation that superintendent is making, puts us now at what, 2.26?
Yep, that's where the 6
That's where the
is.
6 is? Aha, that's where it is. 2.26%. I'm going to ask the board members to kind of go around and give me their thoughts on their support for, or their thoughts about this budget, just so that we can kind of get an idea if we have, you know, or if we're going to be able to come to a consensus on Monday night. You just can let me know if you're leaning in one way or another. Crystal, you want to start us? You're in my top left corner, so.
Oh, yikes, me first. I mean, if the administration is confident with the 2.26, yeah.
Deb, what you thinking? Debbie, I think you're muted. There's,
Yeah, she is muted.
I think she's trying to get herself in.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Okay, sorry, I keep forgetting about that. I think that's fine. I think the 2.26 is good.
Kathy?
I support the 2.26. Problem with that.
Let's see who moved. Nicole, how about you?
Honestly, I'm on the fence. I don't know. Not that it matters because you guys will have the votes, but I'm not sure.
It matters because we want, we want you to feel confident one way or another. So if you think of anything else you want to know in the meantime, please ask the question, Miss Becky?
I don't know, it's hard because they're still collecting data. We don't know what the impact is on students. So part of me would like it to be a little bit more conservative on the side of the Board of Ed to make sure that we have the supports in place so children aren't falling further and further behind. Hearing that, this is pretty much going to be tier 2 help is a little scary because that means, it's not going to give much for, tier 1 kids before they get to tier 2. So I don't know. It's, I don't envy being in Steve's position. It's a lot of guessing going on here, but I kind of wish we were going a little bit more conservative this year and then hopefully able to reduce the budget further next year.
And we will have some tier 1 training in there as well. I don't know, Dave, I don't know if you want to talk about any of that, but we do have some.
Yeah, we're working with all levels. We were just talking about the summer program. Obviously, during our daily instruction, we're putting in supports for everyone because we know everyone's being impacted. So I was just saying there are certain students from the data that won't need the summer program. They'll still have supports that we're putting in place as normal supports that we would always do, but based on where they are right now. Part of that is just relooking at standards, relooking at the instruction we're doing from here until the end of the year, and then the supports for next year as well.
Right. And then providing more insight and training on, differentiation and on really focusing on the varying needs you may have in an individual classroom. So you have that, that solid instruction, in the class at the classroom level before we ever get to tier 2 and 3 interventions. But yeah, it's a good point. And
so Steve, that's what I was going to add. So
thank you, Tawana. I knew you'd save me.
On the initial chart around there where software was, professional development belongs there as well. And that will definitely tap into the skills that teachers and other educators will need to meet the needs of students who have been adversely affected by COVID or, who may have had some difficulty in a distance learning model. And so just really learning how they're doing a great deal of research now on how to meet the needs that are specifically due. Some of the research is built on what happened in Louisiana due to Katrina and things of that nature. So they have instances where school has been disrupted, and they've kind of done a great deal of research around which best practices support not only recovery, but acceleration for some students. And we are using that as the foundation for our planning. So I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, you guys when you were talking earlier, but professional development is going to be a pivotal thing that teachers and other educators are going to need to meet the needs of students in tier 1.
Juana, you're one of the smartest people I know. You're never interrupting. You always add value. So,
And always research-based.
always research-based. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Tawana. Always good to hear your voice. Foster, how about you?
Yeah, I think the budget, as we've been able to adjust it in a rather amazingly short period of time, I think is focused on our needs as we see them now. But it is also flexible enough to allow us to, meet the needs that, we're uncertain right now, and some are probably going to happen that we have no idea that they're going to happen. I think it is flexible enough to allow us to do that, and I think it's a rather really comprehensive use of the ESSER II funding. Just a week ago, we found out that this was here, and I think it's a testimony to the team that we have working, that we must have confidence in, that they've been able to put forward in such a short period of time, such a comprehensive change in our budget. And I think that if we can go forward with this budget utilizing the 302,724 of the new ESSER funding, and come back with a budget of 2.2%, 2.26%, I think that is something that we can support and should be able to support, to getting it out and educating the taxpayers in Plainville.
Brent, I think you're last but certainly not least. What do you think?
I would support the 2.26.
All right, so I feel really that we have access to funds to be able to use the right way and in a planful and purposeful way. I know Steve talked to me earlier today, and the way he explained it to me was very exciting about, creating these projects. And based on that list that we saw earlier about, things like the summer school and all the different things that we think need to be done, including a lot of professional development, and kind of attacking those things and actually having the resources to be able to get them done, I think is really going to be powerful. And, and the fact that we do have a little bit of time and that the money is good for at least till the end of 2023 or so. So I feel really good about that. In the meantime, though, it's to be said, I mean, budget's always a working document. It's changing every day. That's just what they do. And obviously we don't know what we're facing going forward, but as long as we do the right thing, and build upon that every step of the way, I think that we're serving the district well.
There'll be a lot more, shifts. There'll be additional projects. There's things I want to do to, show our support for our teachers and celebrate teachers and their SC, support their SEL as well. There's, so it's going to continue to evolve. I just gave you some initial projects that came to the surface, but there will be more. There'll be more needs, but I feel really good about where we are with. So thank you everybody for your support so far. With taking our, advice and at least feedback and options and considering all of that. Ultimately you make the decision, and I'm going to make the budget work. I have the team to do it. I'm really excited about where we're going to take this district. And I think we're going to have with this, if this budget can be passed, through, and then with the resources from the grants, we're going to do great things, and we already are, but I'm really excited about some of the projects that this is going to allow us to do, and it'll benefit all kids. So that's the great part. Nicole, did you want to say something? I thought I saw you.
Yeah, I just have a procedural question. How do we have to let the government know how we're using the funds so they know that we're using it for COVID? Like how is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that was covered pretty in some detail. This grant's going to be more, there's going to be more oversight with this grant as there are with like title grants that we have to report on regularly. We have to provide our assessment information, how we determined our areas of need. And then we have to provide them with a report of what we're planning to do with the money. And then we also have to provide them with periodic reports on the impact from the use of the funds. So there's going to be more oversight of these funds than some in the past. But Sam is still reporting on the CRF funds and other things. So there's reporting on every grant, but this one is going to have a more similar structure to our title grants and things like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In addition to the planning and the uses, they want a transactional level detail of what we've spent that then they comb through and review. There's a lot of scrutiny behind how we're using this money.
And they really do, because I've seen the emails come back to me and Sam about other grants. They want to know why we spent a certain what was this for? They had some confusion. So they actually look at it, which I was kind of surprised with the volume of grants they have to oversee. But
Okay, that makes sense. And is there any repercussions for a district that doesn't use the money to what they see fit?
I think the superintendent goes to jail.
No.
But if so, just for an example, we are now trying to draw down our CRF grant. We've expended it, and now we need to draw it down to get reimbursed. And if some of the costs that we put in there don't qualify, we're at risk of not being able to draw down that money.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I believe it's the board chair that goes to jail.
Oh. Maybe we could share a cell, Becky, but I snore, so.
That's what you get for your troubles these days.
Yeah.
All right. So unless there's any other questions, I'll ask somebody to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
Mr.
adjourn.
Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Deb made the motion to adjourn.
That beat you.
A second.
Foster, second.
All right. Foster's going to be my second.
Yeah, okay, whatever. It was just silence there. That could have kept us here all night, and there, Steve's boiler turn on again.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you guys very much again. And
Hey, guess what? If you miss me, you get to